There is a courtroom in this county where the wood paneling on the walls hasn't been updated since 1987. Fluorescent lights, 20 seats in the gallery, a monitor on a rolling cart that the bailiff plugged in at 9:53 in the morning. I sat in the second row with my hands folded in my lap and I did not look at her. When the footage started playing on that monitor, I watched the judge's face instead. I had already seen the footage 200 times. I needed to see what someone looks like the first time they see it. Let me back up. Welcome to real-life verdict. Get comfortable. The people in this story had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. My name is Raymond. I spent 38 years as a machinist before the plant downsized, and I took an early retirement I wasn't sure I wanted. I still get up at 5:40 in the morning. I don't know how not to. The house I live in I bought in 1987, end of a cul-de-sac, half-acre lot, 3 bedrooms that used to have people in them. My wife Carol died 11 years ago, and the house got quieter in a way I never fully adjusted to. My son Michael lives 6 miles away. He comes for Sunday dinner most weeks. He wore his high school baseball tournament ring on his right hand all through those dinners. It's too tight for him now, but he won't resize it. I noticed that every time he reached across the table for the bread, I noticed things. That's just the way I'm built. Twice a month I drive to the county fairgrounds to supervise the kids in the metalworking program. I donated my old lathe 3 years ago and I show up Tuesday and Thursday afternoons during the school year. I gave them a Craftsman toolbox on wheels that I moved from the plant when I retired. The top drawer doesn't close flush anymore. I've labeled every drawer in my own handwriting. The kids know not to leave the caliper in the 4th drawer. Those are the rules. I had a Craftsman toolbox. I had a routine. I had a house at the end of a street where I knew exactly what was supposed to happen and when. And I had a daughter-in-law named Melissa. She and Michael have been married 7 years. I watched him at their wedding with that ring tight on his right hand, and I thought, he's happy. She seemed good to him. She's the kind of person who fills a room. Quick to smile, quick with a story. Makes you feel like you're the most interesting person at the table. I liked her for a long time. 2 years ago, when I had knee surgery, Melissa offered to check on me. She'd come by and make sure I have what I needed. After a couple weeks, she just started letting herself in. I gave her a key. I didn't think much about it. She was family. That's what I kept coming back to. She was family. About a year before any of this started, she began helping with my mail during weeks I wasn't well. October, I had the flu. She checked the box for me every couple of days while I was down. I appreciated it. I told her so. There was one thing she said at a Sunday dinner somewhere in that period that I filed away without quite knowing why. We were talking about the house. Nothing serious, just table conversation. And she said something about how Michael had always loved the place. How it would be nice someday, you know, down the road. She didn't finish the sentence. She picked up her fork. I moved the conversation on. But I've thought about that unfinished sentence a lot since then. November 7 was a Thursday. I checked the mailbox that evening around 5:30. My bank statement wasn't there. I assumed misdelivery, made a note to watch for it. That's what I do. I make notes. The first Sunday of every month I sit down at my kitchen table and I reconcile every account. I've done that since 1981. It takes about 45 minutes. And I do it with a cup of coffee and whatever is playing on the radio. My accounts are not complicated, but they are mine, and I know every number in them the way I know every drawer in that toolbox. November's reconciliation was the first Sunday of the month. The bank statement still hadn't arrived. I called the bank and asked when it was mailed. They gave me a date. It should have been there. I ordered a duplicate. November 14, a second statement was missing. I want you to understand something. At this point I was not alarmed. I was paying attention. There is a difference between those two things, and that difference is what I would like you to hold on to for the rest of this story. Then came November 21st. I was leaving for the hardware store at 9:40 in the morning. I backed out of my garage and there was Melissa's car. Pulling away from my mailbox at the end of the driveway, she waved. I waved back. I pulled forward and checked the box. My electric bill was gone. I sat in the car for a moment. I did not pull out my phone. I did not turn around and follow her. I drove to the hardware store and I bought the sandpaper I needed and I drove home. 3 missing pieces of mail over 4 weeks. Each one during a period when Melissa had a reason, or an excuse, to be near my house. 3 is not a coincidence. 3 is a beginning. December 3, first Sunday. Kitchen table, coffee, radio on low. I went through every account. The pattern was unmistakable now. I sat there for a few minutes after I finished. Then I washed out the cup and went and got dressed because Michael and Melissa were coming for dinner. I made pot roast. I let her have a second helping. We talked about the holidays and Michael's work schedule and whether I needed anything from the store. She said she was happy to check my mail anytime I needed. I said that was kind of her. I thanked her. I meant it. She had no idea what I was thankful for. December 18, late afternoon. I installed a motion-activated camera inside a weatherproof housing mounted under the mailbox post. It points directly at the opening. It captures a clear view of anyone opening the box. The footage goes to the cloud automatically and keeps a timestamp on every frame. That evening I sent Melissa a text, told her I had a doctor's appointment Thursday, and asked if she could pick up my mail. She said of course. Happy to help. December 19, 10:32 a.m. I was at the kitchen table with my coffee when the motion alert came in. I watched it on my laptop at 11:17. She opens the box, removes 2 envelopes. The camera is close enough that I could read the face of her watch. She takes both envelopes and walks to her car. I closed the laptop. I finished my coffee. I had one more thing I needed to check. I want you to stay with me here, because this is where everything I thought I understood started to come apart. Not the facts. I had the facts. What came apart was the shape of it. Because this wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of bad judgment she'd feel sick about later. She had been doing this every week with the comfort of someone who had decided she would never be caught. January 15, 3:04 p.m. I was at the fairgrounds when the motion alert came through. I didn't look at it until I got home. The footage showed her at my mailbox at 3:04 p.m. She removed a bank statement. She put it in her purse without even looking at it, like it was already hers. Like she'd already decided that anything that came out of that box belonged to whatever future she was arranging in her head. I had been invited into that future without being asked. The house I paid off in 2009. The account I'd been building since 1995. She had a word for all of it. I heard her use it at dinner once. She called it family money, like it existed somewhere in the middle of all of us rather than belonging to a specific person who had worked 38 years for it. I thought about that word. Family money. I thought about what she was planning and how long she had been planning it, and I wondered if I was seeing something that wasn't there. That's important. I wondered. A man who doesn't let himself wonder is a man who convinces himself of things. I needed to be certain. There was something she didn't know about me. I'll tell you what it was shortly. February 12 was a Wednesday. I drove to Dennis's house after dinner. Dennis is 62, retired deputy sheriff, keeps a police scanner in his kitchen that he listens to while doing crossword puzzles. We worked together at the plant for 11 years before he went into law enforcement. He is not a man who tells you what you want to hear. I set my laptop on his kitchen table and showed him 4 months of footage and 2 months of bank records with the missing statements annotated on a printed timeline. He watched the footage in silence. All of it. He didn't say anything until it was over. Then he said, "Ray, this isn't family business anymore. This is theft. You know that, right?" I told him I knew. He asked if I told Michael. I said no. He said I should call the prosecutor's office before the dividend check arrived in March. He knew the right person to call. He said he'd testify as a character witness if it came to that. I drove home. I sat in the kitchen for a while. The house was quiet the way it gets at night. I thought about Michael sitting across from me at that table with his ring too tight on his finger and no idea what his wife was doing. I decided I'd let the check arrive. Let her show me exactly what she intended to do with it. Now let me tell you about the thing she never accounted for. I have reconciled every account on the first Sunday of every month since 1981. 43 years. I have never missed a reconciliation, and I have never needed someone to explain a discrepancy to me twice. Every drawer in that toolbox is labeled because I believe that a thing kept in order will tell you when something is wrong. I noticed the first missing statement the same week it didn't arrive. I noticed the pattern by week 5. And when I installed that camera on December 18, I had already documented enough for a prosecutor to take the call seriously. She thought I could barely work my phone. I found that out later, in discovery, a conversation she'd had with a friend sometime in January or February, when she was comfortable, when she was certain. He'll never notice, she said. He can barely work his phone. The camera I installed with my phone had been logging time-stamped, cloud-backed footage for 2 months by then. March 14, I checked my account online. The March dividend check had cleared. $14,000. It had been endorsed with a signature that was not mine and deposited by mobile app to an account I didn't recognize. I opened a folder on my desktop. I had labeled it documentation. I added the screenshot and went to make dinner. March 31, 2 p.m. Police Station. I brought printed bank records, a written timeline of every missing piece of mail, and a USB drive with 4 months of footage. The detective took my statement. He said they would investigate. I drove to the fairgrounds. 2 of the kids were working on a tolerancing exercise I'd left them the week before. I checked their work. We talked about the fit of a machine part, and what it means when the measurement is almost right, but not quite. April 25th, Michael called me 12 times before noon. I did not answer. Arthur called once. He said, "I'll sit with you. You shouldn't go through that alone." I told him the hearing was June 8. Before we get to what happened in that courtroom, I need to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone with access to your life? A key, a code, a habit they knew about, and later had to reckon with what that access was used for? Because the hardest part of this story isn't the legal piece. It's the calculation. The fact that someone looked at a family that had let her in and decided it was a resource to manage. If that's sitting with you right now, I want you to stay in the comments. I read them, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do that now, because what happened in that courtroom is where this whole thing lands. Let's keep going. June 8th. County Courthouse. Courtroom 3B. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, 20 seats in the gallery. Arthur sat beside me in the second row. I had my hands folded in my lap. I did not look at her. Melissa sat at the defense table in a navy dress. She looked composed. Her attorney had a narrative prepared about misunderstanding and family miscommunication. About a woman who was only trying to help. I had heard versions of that narrative in my head for months. I knew exactly where it was going to break. The prosecutor submitted Raymond's bank records, the printed timeline, and the USB drive into evidence. Then the bailiff rolled in the monitor. 40 seconds of footage. March 12, 10:47 a.m. Melissa at my mailbox. She opens it, removes an envelope, looks over her shoulder, puts the envelope in her purse, walks to her car. The timestamp is in the corner. Her face is clear. The envelope is visible. 2 days later, that envelope's contents would be deposited into an account I didn't recognize with a signature I never wrote. I watched the judge's face. I had watched that footage 200 times, and what I wanted to see was the first time. The defense attorney argued entrapment. He argued family conflict. He used the words misunderstanding and confusion and grief, as in, Raymond is a grieving widower who may have misinterpreted his daughter-in-law's efforts to help. The judge listened. Then he found probable cause and set the case for arraignment. 9 minutes after the footage played, the attorney had a narrative about a woman who was only trying to help. The footage had 40 seconds of her looking over her shoulder. He'll never notice. He can barely work his phone. I stood up. I nodded to Arthur. I walked out. Michael was on the courthouse steps. He was alone. He looked like a man who had been awake for 3 days, which I imagine he had. He started to say something and then stopped. I looked at him. I said, "You can call me when you're ready." Then I got in my car. I drove to the fairgrounds. It was a Tuesday. The kids would be there in the afternoon. I went early and I opened up the shop and I stood in the quiet for a while before anyone arrived. The smell of machine oil and metal dust. The Craftsman toolbox against the wall, with every drawer labeled in my own handwriting, the top drawer that doesn't close flush. I knew every number in every account. I had known since November. The quiet wasn't the same kind of quiet the house had been. This was a different kind. The kind that comes after something is finished. I pulled out the fourth drawer and checked that the caliper was in the right place. It was.